Welcome. So glad to have you here today. David had this great idea to have like a series of events for the exhibition at Open Source Gallery. The exhibition, if you didn't see it yet, is a huge snail that's wrapped in fabric, and it basically is almost bigger than the space itself. And the show is called Snaileidolia.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have had like, it's amazing because the gallery itself is really made for passerbys to be just, there's a lot of passerbys just walking by, and it has been such an amazing success, and how people react like very excited about this show. It has been a very, very successful for us. So the other thing that happened, we already went to a Earth Day snail safari with Matthew Bills, was also beautiful, where we found a lot of snails, and maybe you will tell us more about the species that we found or didn't find. And there's also a book out, A Confluence of Snails, that David wrote, and that's for sale at the gallery and also online. You just send us an email at contact@opensourcegallery.org, and you can have a copy of it. Yeah, but I would like, I'm very happy to have you here, Dr. Norine Yeung and Menno Schilthuizen.
Schilthuizen?
Yeah,
all right. I've been practicing.
Clearly.
Sorry. But I would like David maybe to introduce our two panelists.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super happy that both of you are here. I've been looking forward to this. So I'll, the bios you gave us are on the website, but Menno Schilthuizen is a ecologist and evolutionary biologist at Naturalis Biodiversity Center, and also the chair in a chair position at Leiden University. And Norine Yeung is a senior curator of malacology at the Bishop Museum. And, with both of you, I kind of came across both of you as I was sort of doing all this research. Your names kept popping up. With Menno, there were several new species that you and Taxon Expeditions had named. The one after Greta Thunberg and a few others. And with Norine, it seems like anytime you take a hike down snail research, you end up in Hawaii, you end up in Oahu. It seems to be like a center of activity where there's a lot of stuff going on. So why don't we just kind of jump in? And, I really wanted to do this so the two of you could kind of tell us, what you guys do. So as like a kind of introduction, but we can also get into some of the details. So I guess I'll start with Norine. So rather than just a general kind of intro of what you do at the Bishop Museum, which would be great, I'll also start with a very specific kind of thing. I know you wrote, or you co-authored an essay recently about food sources for tree snails. So maybe start out a little bit with talking about how that research into those food sources feeds into what you guys do at the Bishop Museum.
So Hawaii unfortunately has a lot of names that you can call it, and in science world, it's a fascinating ecological and evolutionary laboratory. But we also have not so happy names for Hawaii, like the extinction capital of the world. So, and it's just not for snails, but a lot of the plants and birds, as well as the insects that are going extinct faster than we can study, that we can save them. And so snails is, are one of the groups that have like one of the highest extinctions in the islands. We used to have about 759 known snails. These are just a name of snails that we put names to, right? And we have barely 300 left, right? And all of these snails, except for 3, are only found on these islands. So once they're gone, it's, there's nowhere else in the world that can reseed these islands with these particular snails. And there are a few things that we need to do to help conserve these snails, not just snails, but just biodiversity broadly, right? First is we need to know what they are, right? Because if you don't know what they are, you don't know what they look like, you have no way of saving them. The next thing is, where are they, right? And if you don't know where they are, same thing, it's very difficult to save them. But once you are able to, and that's what we call systematics or taxonomy. You know what they are and how they related to each other. Next, but the thing is that once you do that, there's a lot of ecological understanding that we don't have right now. And so that's the next step. And so that's understanding what type of habitat do they need? Do they need a particular temperature regimen? What do they eat, right? So how can we protect the forests, protect the environments, protect the streams if we don't know what habitats requirements are needed to sustain and keep a lot of our species living? And so that's what this paper was now tackling, now that we have a better idea of what species are left in these islands. What do we need now to further their survival? And just understanding what they eat is huge. And snails sometimes have a bad rap of being gross and slimy. It's like, why are you saving them? They're just eating up all my vegetables. Gross. But the thing is that a lot of the little things, well, I have a good, very good Native Hawaiian friend that is also a conservationist, and he puts it, if you can't take care of the small stuff, how are you going to take care of the big stuff, right? And that's Keahi Bustamante. And, if, I love panda bears and polar bears, they're all very cute and cuddly. And I don't want them to go extinct, honestly, right? But if they go extinct, we're not going to have like these huge ecosystem collapses. But when we lose the invertebrates, our decomposers, the things that are basically our natural recyclers, our food source, right? Because we eat them too. It's like, who doesn't like abalone or clams and garlic and butter, or anything in garlic and butter is good, right? But the thing is that once they're gone, we're going to have a very hard time in keeping our environment stable enough to allow us humans to live happily and comfortably, right? So is that sorry if that was a longer answer than you expected?
No, that's great. That's great. That's a good start. Yeah. So with Menno, I'll do the same. Give us a general intro on what you do, but the specific would be, recently you identified a new semi-slug that was sort of in the news. I have a Google alert for snail science, and every time something comes up, I see that. So that came up very recently. So tell us about this new, new to science, I guess.
I guess I have the same Google alert, David.
Yeah.
So that specific, well, as Norine already said, there are more snails in the world, more snail species in the world than you can shake a stick at. Even a relatively small archipelago like Hawaii already has almost 1,000 species. If you look at continental areas, there are tens of thousands, and we're talking about land snails and slugs, especially in areas like islands or complex mountain areas like the Balkans. You have a lot of species of snail that easily get isolated, for example, in small valleys, in caves, on mountaintops, and they over time become new species. So these areas where you have a lot of opportunities for snail populations to get cut off from other snail populations, which in snails is much easier, of course, than in flying insects or flying animals, which can, you know, they're mobile. Snails being crawlers and very slow crawlers, they're prone to becoming isolated. And that also means that they're prone to showing endemic species that occur in a small area and nowhere else on Earth, like the examples from Hawaii that Norine gave. And complex mountainous areas are also areas where you see the same phenomenon as in archipelagos. And you mentioned earlier that I run an organization called Taxon Expeditions. Actually, my wife runs it, but we founded it together, and we call it the Scientific Travel Agency. It's a company that organizes real scientific expeditions for mixed teams of scientists and members of the general public, basically tourists who like to be part of something unusual, who like science, who like to understand how science is done, and who like to be part of the whole process of science. So on these expeditions, the main one of the main, well, I can't really say it's the main aim, but sort of the highlight of the whole procedure, the whole process, is to discover one or more new species. And it's a well-kept secret among biologists that it's frighteningly easy to discover new species, as long as you are a taxonomic expert who knows a particular group of organisms in a certain area, and it is a group of organisms that is not vertebrates or flowering plants, then there's a good chance that you will be able to find new species. So in those expeditions of 10 days, we try to discover one or more new species based on the expertise that is on the expedition. And well, I'm usually on it, so I'm in some areas of the world and know the snail fauna fairly well, and well enough to be able to say that we found something new. And one of the places we go to is the Mount Durmitor, which is a tall mountain in Montenegro, in the heart of the Balkan Peninsula, where there are still several groups of snails and slugs that are incompletely studied and that contain undescribed species. We know that these groups are, we call them taxonomically messy or unresolved. There are still things there that are hidden under other names or are hidden that are very similar to each other. And this slug was also one of them. They are on the outside very similar to a slug that we've known for more than a century, which is quite widespread in Europe. But this slug is externally and even internally quite similar to that slug, but it's clearly different in the DNA. That's the first indication that it's something different. And once you have seen from the DNA that it's different, you can start looking for details in the anatomy or in the way they look on the outside to really try to demarcate it from its related species. And the nice thing about this slug, which we named Limax pseudo-cinerio niger, which is a bit of a long name, but it's appropriate because it is very similar to Limax cinerio niger, which is the species it looks like, the old species that we knew already. These are not small animals. These are huge. They're also the leopard slug. Limax maximus is a species that occurs all over the world. It's from Europe originally, but it's been introduced in many parts of the world. And these slugs can reach 20 centimeters. And they can weigh up to 100 grams. So they're the size of a bird or a small mammal. And yet, Limax is a genus of slugs with not just this one undescribed species, but probably lots of new species still waiting to be discovered, or at least to be properly circumscribed and named. Often the people who work on these slugs, they already have a suspicion that certain populations are new. so that was also the case with this one. We had our eye on it already for a while, that it was probably something separate. And it's, for a lot of people, it came as a surprise that in Europe you can still discover new species of animal that are that large. So together with the participants, we properly described it, we dissected it. We usually bring a mobile DNA lab so we could sequence the DNA from these slugs and also from the related species. And and then we published it together with I guess they are citizen scientists or community scientists who were part of the expedition. And that's what we always try to do on these expeditions. It's not always snails or slugs, because I also work on beetles, and so does my wife and some of the people we bring with us. So we have also described beetles, but